The Ontario provincial election is happening on February 27th, 2025. And I think it's really important that us residents of Ontario and really Canada as a whole pay attention to what's happening. Ontario is the biggest province, has the most people, and it has a lot of sway as to what happens on a national stage. We're really focused on what's happening down south, the threat of tariffs, becoming the 51st state, putting tariffs on the auto industry, which would be really bad for the province of Ontario and across Canada. But I think we also need to remain cognizant or focused on the issues that existed before Trump came into office. In Ontario, there's been severe shortages of doctors. You know, you have millions of people that don't actually have a family doctor. There's issues with cutting on education spending, housing in Ontario, not enough places for people to live. There's a lot that we still need to remain focused on despite the threat of tariffs. So I think it's really important that we take time to look at each of the parties' platforms and the costing that goes along with it. And, you know, the platform is really the philosophy of the party, what they promise that they'll do. The costing is how you ground their promises in reality. You know, it's easy to say that we're going to cut here, we're going to spend here, but we need to see where the money's going to come from and where it's going to go. So, you know, it makes it real. Each of the parties will eventually release their platform and the costing that goes along with it. Usually that happens closer to election date. So far, only the Green Party has released their platform and the costing. And so we can take a look at that to get an idea of what we might expect from the other parties. And while the Green Party really doesn't have a real chance to win the election here, I think it's still worth it to take a look, to get an idea and to get our feet wet, and to get my feet wet in analyzing this information. So we'll start with the Green Party, look at their platform, see what they're promising, and we'll go from there. All right. So when it comes to actually finding this information, you just need to go to the Green Party of Ontario website. Here you can download the platform and download the costing that goes along with that. Here you have the table of contents. First, I'll mention that this is the first time I've really looked at this, the costing for a political party or the platform. I've never really gone too in depth about these topics, but this year I'm more interested. So it seems to me that the way you order things is probably the order of importance to you. So you can gain some information just by looking at this. I feel like obviously housing is important. It's been important to residents of Ontario for a really long time. It's really unaffordable to live here. It's hard to get a home. We're looking at the economic fairness, the economics of Ontario, perhaps looking at cutting taxes or increasing taxes on those who make more. Makes sense. The Green Party, talking about protecting the environment, which, you know, it's natural. It's the Green Party. Got protection against tariffs, which is, you know, obvious. Discussion on healthcare, like I mentioned, a lot of people don't have doctors. We don't have enough nurses, personal support workers. People can't get beds in hospitals. All this makes sense. It tracks with what's important to people in Ontario. And there's a lot more, but I'm not going to go through each in one of these. So we'll kind of skip over and look into the additional detail that we have here. You have like the exact pathways that they think they can put in place to make it easier. So for example, they're planning on building 2 million homes right here in a variety of ways, allow single family dwellings to be divided into multiple condominiums. That's, you know, even in my own neighborhood, that's not really popular. People want single family neighborhoods to remain single family neighborhoods. And there's a lot of barriers to wanting to do the conversion. So if that makes it easier, could make more affordable housing available for residents of Ontario, which is important for us. Codes and land use planning laws, which, you know, make it more difficult to begin construction on new homes. So also beneficial. One thing that's important here is ending the land transfer tax for first-time home buyers, which would make a huge difference. We bought our home just last year, and that was a nice chunk of change. If you get rid of that, it could definitely make a difference for new home buyers to purchase a home, which would be awesome. This is really nice, at least for me looking at it, knowing people that are trying to get in the housing market, a multiple property speculation tax or something of that ilk, so that if you buy multiple properties, it just gets more expensive. So could hopefully reduce the competition for new home buyers, make it more affordable, so that it's not just people with a lot of money that can buy all the houses. You can make it more difficult so it can be easier for first-time home buyers or people with lower incomes. What's interesting is if you go to the costing for the platform, you can actually see exactly how they plan on moving the money around and how much it'll cost to make certain changes here. So you can see that when it comes to the Housing Now, ending the land transfer tax for first-time home buyers, HST for nonprofits, and support for cooperatives will cost, at least in 2025, 2026, $147 million. The millions is up here. And for the next few years after that, for the next 4 years, it'll be $292 million. Overall, it'll cost $1 billion to end that land transfer tax and the other incentives that they have here. So you can see that the costing is really interesting because it tells you exactly how much they think things will cost. It's never accurate. You're projecting out 4 years. You never know what's going to happen, but it's nice to have an idea. And I'll just skip to the end, because you might say, well, where are you going to get all this money? Well, the idea is they're going to gain revenue from other sources that make up for it, which we'll see shortly when we look at the next thing. All right, so the next thing that I think is really interesting, maybe a hot button topic, will be cutting taxes for us normal folks and making the richest pay their fair share. So the basic premise here they have is that they're going to cut taxes for low and middle income earners under 65,000 and households making under 100,000, saving people up to $1,700 per year, which is pretty great. It's helpful. It's something. And they'll increase the employer health tax exemption to 1.5 million so that small businesses can hire more workers, which is always good. We need more business in Canada. We need more entrepreneurs. So anything that can actually incentivize that is okay in my book. Of course, make billionaire fossil fuel companies pay municipalities for the right to use our land for their infrastructure. I'm not surprised that they're going to go after the fossil fuel companies. Something else that's really quite popular. There's been a lot of issues with Loblaws and gouging and collusion within grocery corporations, so that maybe your groceries can become a little bit more affordable while these companies are hitting record profits. People can't afford to buy groceries for their kids. So that's something that I actually think I approve. So we can go ahead and look at what that's going to look like. So if you see here, lowering taxes for low and middle income earners is going to cost about $4 billion, a total of $18 billion over the course of the 4 years in total. That's a big cost. Now, if you see how they plan on making something like that up, if we go to the revenue side of things, they're going to increase the top tax bracket by 3%, which will make up at least 10 billion of the 18 billion that they're going to be spending. We'll look into this in more detail, but I just want to show where they expect to spend more, they're going to find a way to bring it back. This is why the costing is really important for you to look at, because they can make promises, but they have to be realistic. They have to be able to back it up with the dollars. The other thing I thought looked really interesting to me, or looked beneficial, was implementing 10 provincially legislated paid sick days for everybody. I think that's the basic thing that everyone should have. If you don't have sick days at work, it can be brutal. So this will give people the flexibility to take care of themselves, make sure that they remain physically and mentally healthy. As we deal with so much stress nowadays, this is something I'm definitely for. There's a bunch of things that the Green Party has mentioned that I like, but there's one major thing that, at least to me, is missing, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. One other thing that I liked is they're going to, well, it's the Green Party, of course, but they're going to provide some incentives, for example, like installing a free heat pump for households with incomes under $100,000 and zero interest loans for households above $100,000. I think there was an incentive similar to this before, but I think this is more comprehensive. It covers more households. So definitely interesting. Definitely something that would be nice. It's all about, I'm all for protecting the environment and lowering the cost of my energy bills. And it seems like this would allow me to do it. Oh, the big news here is how they plan on protecting our economy against the tariff threats. So they're gonna. This is when it gets a little funny for me, because it stops being as concrete as some of the other things they mentioned, and kind of, we're gonna create a task force. I don't know what that means. I don't know what they're going to do, but stuff like that doesn't really move the needle for me, because they could easily say we created a task force, we did research, but doesn't really mean much. But something that's more concrete could be creating this investment tax credit to unlock business investments in Ontario. That would be great. This one also is working with other provinces to remove the interprovincial trade barriers. It's so incredibly vague. Maybe it has to be, but I would just want more detail as to what exactly they're planning to do. What does Ontario want Quebec to do? What does Ontario want Manitoba or the prairies to do to make interprovincial trade barriers come down? Like, give us something concrete. What barriers are up, but they give us this vague nonsense so that they don't have to commit to anything. That's stuff this I don't like. And I'm just talking about the Green Party, but I have a feeling that most of the other parties will be some version of vague things when it comes to the tariff threats, because frankly, we don't know what's going to happen. We just know that they're hanging over our necks the entire time. So, oh yeah. And the one thing that is missing that I would have liked to see is that we have so many natural resources in Canada. We have the oil in Alberta, and I know they're the Green Party. They would never go for something like this, but the east to west pipeline that's been canceled, that many people on TV, CBC News have been discussing. No mention of it here. I know they're not going to go for it to the Green Party, but that kind of puts them in a bind, because that's maybe one of the bigger ways that we can diversify our economy and get it out from under the thumb of the United States. So that's unfortunate. And they plan on supporting tech startups to build stronger partnerships between industry, academia. It's a little vague. I would, you always want to see something more concrete, but maybe this is all that they have. No, to be fair to, all the parties except for the Conservatives here, this was a surprise early call. Maybe they heard rumors of it, but nobody was expecting an election to be called this early. So they might have just been putting things together as fast as they could. Yeah, and this has been a big discussion, is the privatizing of our healthcare system in Ontario, which seems to be what Doug Ford is trying to do. People don't like it. People like the way our healthcare already is. It's been difficult. If you take funding away from healthcare, what do you expect to happen? It'll get worse. So that's something that probably a lot of people like to hear, but it's something that most of us will forget, as I predict that during any sort of debates, Doug Ford isn't going to talk about healthcare. He's going to talk about the tariffs and facing against the U.S., which is great for him, but we need to remember things like privatizing the healthcare in Ontario. So there's a bunch more here. Really, this wasn't supposed to be particularly in-depth, because frankly, the Green Party is not going to win and they're not going to be the main opposition here in Ontario. There's no way. But this is just kind of an opportunity to look at what the platforms look like, what they say. and to take a look at what the costing breakdown is. I think it's really useful to look at this and to get an idea of how they intend to spend the money. And so you can see that the net new operational spending is going to be about, here we are with $15 billion over the course of 4 years is the net cost of what they plan to implement. That's kind of what it is. And at that point, we would have to see if it ends up being more or less than that. And like I said, I'm really curious to see what the other parties that actually have a chance at winning. I know the Conservatives have a sizable lead at this point, but I'd be really curious to see what other parties have in place to compare. Right now, all I have is this. I could look at what it was 4 years ago, but I don't know how useful it is or what it was in the past. I don't know how useful that is when the world's changed, concerns have changed, priorities have changed. So once we learn more about what the other parties are planning on doing, I can make another video and in that case, compare and contrast. So I think that's about it for today. So that was the Ontario Green Party, a quick overview of their platform and their costing. So definitely go take a look, read it through yourself. Don't just rely on me. I don't know everything. I'm a layman, hence the name of the channel. When it comes to this stuff, I'm just a concerned citizen that's trying to do a little bit more than just complain on Reddit. So there you go.